Alright, so we're just going to go over the basic installation of the precision soil sensor receiver in this video tutorial. There are two components to the precision soil sensor system. We've got a wireless soil sensor that installs in the ground here, and then the receiver that's going to hook up to your irrigation controller. So again, just for this video tutorial, we'll be going over the receiver part of the installation. Okay, so the first thing you're going to want to do is to locate your irrigation controller. One of the benefits of the precision soil sensor system is that it'll work with nearly any irrigation controller out there. So right here I've got an Irritrol rain dial that I'm just using as an example. So let's go ahead and open it up. So when you open up the controller, you'll notice we've got a bunch of different terminals here. A lot of them have numbers on them. Those are the terminals that have the wire running out to each of your individual valves. So in this particular example, we've got a total of 12 numbered terminals here, meaning we've got 12 possible valves or 12 zones on the controller. We won't actually be touching any of those today. You'll also notice we've got a terminal labeled VC, as in valve common. It could also be labeled C or spelled out common, depending on your controller. You'll also notice then we've got a 24 volt terminal here with 2 screws associated with it. That's where your controller gets its power. And then we've got also a sensor terminal down here with 2 screws associated with it. This could also be labeled SEN or just S, depending on your controller. If your controller doesn't have a terminal like this, don't sweat. We'll cover how to handle that situation in a second here. So the first thing we're going to do as part of the installation process is we're going to take the 2 red wires coming from the receiver and we're going to screw those into the 24 volt terminal that I just showed you, making sure to power down the controller before we start any of this installation. Before we get to connecting any of the wires though, what you're going to want to do is make sure you run up all of the wires from the precision soil sensor up through the hole in the bottom of your irrigation controller to make sure that you're able to close the front of the controller when you're done. So now that we've got the controller powered down, the first thing you're going to want to do before we hook up those 2 red wires from the receiver is to note whether or not there's any polarity on the wires already hooked up to your controller to provide power. You'll notice in this particular example we've got a wire with a white stripe on the right and a wire with no stripe on the left. So we're just going to want to make sure that those 2 end up back in the same place once we're done here. So to install those 2 red wires, let's first go ahead and unscrew these a little here. And there actually isn't any polarity on these 2 wires, so you don't have to worry about which one goes into which screw terminal here. Let's just make sure we get that up. And screw back down. And then do the same on this side. Great. Now you've connected the power source for the precision soil sensor receiver. So now that we've got the power hooked up, the next step is going to be to grab the white and brown wire coming from the precision soil sensor receiver and plug those into the sensor port here. If your controller doesn't have a sensor port, again, we'll cover what to do in that situation in just a second here. And for most all situations, it is going to be the white and brown wire you're going to be dealing with. But if your irrigation controller manual says you've got a normally open sensor port, you're going to be using the white and yellow wires instead. So first things first, you'll notice we've got a jumper installed in the sensor port. It's just a piece of metal connecting these 2 screw terminals here, so we're going to go ahead and want to remove that. That's what that looks like. And just like what we did with the 2 red wires, we're going to screw these 2 wires, the white and brown, into the sensor terminal. And again, there's no polarity on these, so you don't have to worry which one goes into which screw here. So let's stick that in. Screw that down. Do the same over here, making sure we get a nice snug fit. And And there you go. That completes your wiring for the precision soil sensor receiver. So in the event that your controller doesn't have a sensor terminal like this one does here, what you're going to need to do is locate the valve common wire. So in this case, on this particular controller, it's labeled VC, but like I said, it could be labeled just C as in common or spelled out common as well. And what we're going to do is we're going to remove that wire, and in its place, hook up either the white or brown wire from the precision soil sensor receiver. Again, there's no polarity on these, so it doesn't matter which one you hook up, but you're only going to want to hook up one. So now that we've got it loosened up, we're just going to stick that wire in there and screw it back down. The next thing we're going to do is take the remaining brown wire from the precision soil sensor receiver and the common wire that we just unscrewed from the controller and wire those together using a wire nut. Just like that. Now that we've got all the wires hooked up, we can close the controller and power the unit back up. When we power the unit back up, you should notice the LEDs illuminating on the precision soil sensor receiver and 2 dashes showing on the LCD, as well as, of course, power being restored to the controller.